When she walked out of my house for the last time, she did not look back at me. I stood near the door, holding the edge of the table, pretending I was strong. I smiled, even though my chest felt tight. I told myself not to cry, because I did not want her to remember me like that. The door closed softly behind her. No slam, no anger, just a quiet click, like the end of something that had already been dying for a long time. That sound stayed with me for many nights. I remember thinking, maybe she will turn around. Maybe she forgot something. Maybe she would say my name one last time. But she never did. That was the moment I understood something very painful. You can love someone with your whole heart and still lose them without a fight. You can give them space, care, patience, and still be left standing alone in your own home. I did not stop her. I did not beg. I did not ask her why. Because sometimes love means letting go quietly, even when your heart is screaming inside. I was not always this calm person who speaks slowly and keeps feelings inside. There was a time when I believed love was something you could hold on to tightly. A time when I thought if you cared enough, if you stayed long enough, things would always work out. I learned the hard way that life does not work like that. This story is not about anger. It is not about blame. It is about a bond that grew slowly, broke quietly, and ended without noise. It is about how I learned to free someone from my heart without hating them. I met her many years ago, during a season of my life when I was already tired. I had raised my children. I had buried my husband. I had learned how to live with silence. The house felt too big after everyone moved on. Rooms echoed when I walked through them. Even the kitchen felt lonely, though it had once been full of voices. Then she came into my life. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gently, like someone stepping into a room and sitting down without asking. She was young then, quiet but not shy. She had a way of listening more than she spoke, and when she smiled, it felt real. At first, she was just someone I helped, someone who needed a place to stay for a while, someone who had no one else nearby. I told myself it would be temporary, but life has a way of stretching temporary things into years. She used to wake up early, even earlier than me. I would hear soft footsteps in the kitchen, the kettle would boil. Sometimes she would leave a cup of tea on the counter for me. No note, no words, just the cup, still warm. Those small things slowly made space in my heart. I did not plan to love her. I did not expect it. But love does not always ask permission. People often think family is only about blood or papers. But sometimes family is built through shared mornings, quiet dinners, and unspoken understanding. We ate together most nights. Not fancy meals, just simple food, cooked slowly. She would sit across from me, her phone face down, and ask about my day. No one had asked me that in years. "How was today?" she would say. And I would pause, surprised by the question. At first, I was careful. I did not want to cross lines. I did not want to expect too much. I reminded myself, she is not your daughter. She is not yours to keep. But the heart does not follow rules very well. As months passed, the house felt alive again. There was laughter, soft music, and sometimes quiet talks late at night. We shared stories about our pasts, carefully, piece by piece. She told me about her disappointments. I told her about my regrets. Neither of us judged the other. That was the beginning of the bond. I started worrying about her like family. If she came home late, I would stay awake. If she sounded tired, I would cook her favorite meal. I told myself it was just kindness, but deep inside, I knew it was more than that. There were moments when I saw her pain clearly. She carried things she never spoke about fully. Sometimes her eyes would look far away, like she was somewhere else. I never pushed her to explain. I thought patience was love. I remember one evening clearly. Rain was falling outside, the power went out, and the house went quiet. We sat at the kitchen table with candles. She looked at me and said softly, "I don't know what I would do without you." Those words stayed with me. I did not say much in response. I just nodded, afraid of how much those words meant to me. I think that was the moment I crossed a line inside myself. I stopped seeing her as someone who would leave someday. I started believing she would stay. That belief was my mistake. As time went on, small changes began to appear. Nothing dramatic, just little things. She started spending more time outside the house. Her phone became more important. Her smiles came less often. I noticed, but I stayed quiet. I told myself, people grow, people change. I did not want to be someone who holds too tightly. There were days when she seemed distant, days when conversations stayed shallow, days when the silence felt heavier than usual. I felt it, but I ignored it, because sometimes ignoring pain feels easier than facing it. I began to worry quietly, late at night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done something wrong. Had I cared too much? Had I expected too much? I never asked her directly. I was afraid of the answers. The house, once full of warmth, began to feel careful, like we were both walking around something fragile, trying not to break it. But fragile things break anyway. Looking back now, I see the signs clearly, but at the time, I held on to hope. Hope can be kind, but it can also be cruel. I did not know then that this story would end with a quiet goodbye. I did not know that love would turn into distance without a single argument. And I did not know that one day I would have to free her from my heart to save myself. The first time I felt the distance clearly, I almost denied it. It was a Thursday evening. She came home later than usual. Her steps were heavier than normal. The soft hum of the radio she usually played in the kitchen was gone. I did not ask why. I simply poured a cup of tea and sat at the table, waiting. When she finally entered, she avoided my eyes. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. I felt a small pang inside me. Something was changing, but I could not name it yet. I said gently, "Dinner is ready." She nodded. No words. We ate quietly, as though the air between us had become thicker. I watched her pick at her food. Normally, she would have told me a story about her day or shared a small laugh, but that night she stayed silent. I kept thinking, maybe she is just tired. I told myself she had no reason to be distant, but late at night I couldn't sleep. Her absence in conversation felt like an empty chair between us. Not a physical one, but something far heavier. The next week, small things began to add up. She started leaving her room door closed more often. She spent long hours on her phone. Sometimes I would hear her speaking quietly to someone, and she would quickly hang up when I walked by. I wanted to ask. I wanted to knock on her door and say, "Are you okay?" But I stopped myself. I had learned over time that pressing someone too much can push them further away. So I waited. I listened. I hoped. One evening, as the rain tapped lightly on the windows, I tried to break the silence. "I made your favorite soup," I said softly, setting the bowl in front of her. She looked at it, then at me. I'm not hungry," she replied. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. I felt my chest tighten. I said nothing. I did not want to make her feel guilty. We sat together at the table, and I sipped my tea slowly. I watched her stare out the window, lost in thoughts she would not share. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, but I didn't. Some boundaries, once crossed, can never be repaired by one touch. Days turned into weeks. Her presence felt lighter in the house, like she was drifting further away. She still spoke to me politely. She still smiled occasionally, but it was always brief, always measured. I began noticing little signs of change I could not ignore. Her laughter became quieter. Her steps, though soft, were no longer familiar. Even the way she looked at the world through the window seemed different, distant, almost detached. I remember one evening sitting in the living room with a book. She came in and said, softly, "I'm going out for a while." I nodded. "Okay," I said, but inside I felt a small fracture forming, a quiet, invisible crack in the bond we had built over years. I tried to remind myself that this was natural. People grow, people change. She had her own life to live, her own dreams. Still, I felt an unfamiliar ache, a hollow space in my chest that whispered, "She's slipping away, and you can't hold on to her." Then came the first confrontation, though it was not really a confrontation at all. It happened one Sunday morning. I had baked some bread. I placed it on the table. She came down, looked at it, and frowned slightly. "Mom, she paused. I waited. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped. Finally, I thought, a conversation. I nodded. "Of course." We sat in the living room. The rain had stopped, leaving soft puddles on the driveway. She avoided my eyes, twisting the edge of her sleeve in her fingers. I I think I need more space," she said. I blinked. "More space?" I asked softly. "Yes," she replied. "I love you, I do, but I feel like I need my own life, my own room, my own—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. I felt the room shrink around me. I wanted to cry, but I stayed silent. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. Her relief was immediate. She smiled faintly, a small weight lifting off her shoulders. And in that moment, I realized that the bond we had built, the quiet love, the care, the unspoken understanding, was beginning to fracture in a way I could not prevent. After that, things changed faster. She started going out more often. She spent weekends away. I noticed her laughter in the house less and less. Sometimes I would catch her at the window, looking out, waiting for something I could not give. I never asked her to stay. I never begged. But every night I lay awake thinking, did I do something wrong? Should I have held on tighter? Or should I let her go completely? Small misunderstandings began to appear. A misplaced cup, a forgotten conversation, a brief irritation. Things that would normally be invisible between us now seemed heavier. "One evening," she said softly, "you never understand me." It was not angry. It was not loud. Just quiet. I wanted to argue, to explain, but I stopped myself. I had learned that sometimes listening without defense is the only way to truly show love. She started to drift further, even when she was in the house. I noticed her retreating into herself, her thoughts always somewhere else. I felt helpless. There were moments I wanted to cry out, but I could not find the words. I remember staring at the kitchen table one evening. The rain was falling again, tapping gently on the roof. Her cup of tea had gone cold. She had left it untouched. And I realized then that the bond we had built was changing, quietly, irreversibly. Yet I tried to hold on to normalcy. I continued to make her favorite meals. I left her notes sometimes. "Hope you had a good day. Don't forget to eat." She read them, sometimes smiled, sometimes did not respond. I kept writing anyway. Love, I thought, is not always about being returned. Sometimes it is only about giving. By now, the tension had become part of the air in the house. Not loud, not dramatic, just noticeable. We both moved around it carefully, like two dancers trying not to step on each other's toes, like two birds circling in a cage too small for both of them. I began to see her less as a companion and more as a fragile being walking away from me. And with that, I realized that the heart can feel loss even before it happens. By the end of that season, I understood something I tried to ignore. She was leaving. Not in anger, not because of me, but because she needed her own life. And nothing I could say, nothing I could do could stop it. It happened on a Thursday. I remember the day clearly. The sky was pale and the wind carried the first hint of winter. Leaves skittered across the driveway as I watched from the kitchen window. She was getting ready to leave again, like she had been doing more and more lately. I thought I would say something. I thought I might finally ask her, "Will you stay?" But when I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat. I could not ask her to stay. I knew I had no right. She came into the kitchen, her coat in hand. She looked at me for a moment, and for a second I saw the girl who had once laughed over tea and stories. Then that look faded, replaced by something distant, like a shadow passing across her face. "I'm leaving for a while," she said quietly. I nodded. "Okay," I whispered. I watched her walk to the door. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to call her back, but I did not. The door closed softly behind her. No slam, no turning back, just the faint click I had learned to dread. That night, the house felt colder than usual. I sat in the living room, staring at the empty chairs around the table. Her cup, still on the counter, felt like a ghost. Her coat hung in the hallway, untouched. Everything was quiet, but my heart screamed inside me. The turning point was not dramatic. It did not come with yelling or confrontation. It came with absence, with the realization that someone you love can slip away without a single word. The next day, she did not come back until late. Her eyes avoided mine, her voice was polite, distant, like she was speaking to someone she barely knew. I tried to reach her. I tried to make small talk. I tried to ask how her day had been, but she only smiled faintly and nodded. It was the first time I truly felt the weight of emptiness. That evening, I sat across from her at the table. I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I said softly, "Are you unhappy here?" She looked at me, eyes flickering. I I don't know," she said finally. I feel like I need more space." I felt the ground shift under me. I wanted to tell her she belonged here, that this was her home. I wanted to say, "I will always care for you, always." But the words would not come. I realized then that some things cannot be held onto. Some hearts cannot be tethered, even with love. The days that followed were the hardest. She became quieter, her smiles rare. She laughed less at our small jokes. She ate in her room more than at the table. Sometimes I would hear the faint click of her phone shutting down, signaling yet another conversation I would never know. One evening, I found her sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket. She did not speak. I just sat beside her quietly, not wanting to break the fragile comb. I could feel her pulling away, like water slipping through my fingers. I I think I need to move on," she said finally, almost to herself. I nodded. I did not argue. I did not beg. I realized at that moment that holding on could hurt more than letting go. It was a quiet betrayal, not loud or harsh, but it felt like a crack through the center of my heart. She was not being unkind. She was simply following her own life. And yet, the pain was real. I thought of all the mornings we had shared, the nights we stayed awake talking, the small cups of tea left on the counter. I thought of all the little things that had become our life together. And suddenly, it all felt fragile, like a photograph that could fade if held too tightly. One evening, as the sky turned gray with approaching dusk, she packed a small bag. I watched silently. Every movement felt heavy. Every folded shirt, every zipped pocket, every turned step toward the door echoed inside me like the sound of a bell tolling. She paused at the door. I hope you understand," she said softly. "I don't want to hurt you." I smiled, tears brimming. "I understand," I whispered. "Go where you need to go." She nodded once, then walked out. The door closed behind her. No slam, no turning back. And in that silence, I felt my heart break quietly, completely, irreversibly. The turning point was not her leaving. It was realizing that love is not always about keeping someone close. Sometimes love is about letting someone go, even when your soul wants to hold them forever. I spent that night staring at the empty chairs. I thought about all the times I had tried to give her the space she needed, all the nights I had waited silently for her to come back. And I realized that sometimes space is not enough. Sometimes hearts must separate for their own growth. The weeks that followed were full of quiet reflection. I wrote letters I would never send. I made meals for one. I walked slowly through the house, noticing how different everything felt. The living room, the kitchen, the garden, all carried memories of her presence. And yet, with every memory, I felt a strange peace. Painful, yes. Lonely, yes. But also a sense of having loved fully, of having given everything I could without demanding anything in return. I began to understand what it meant to free someone from your heart. It did not mean forgetting. It did not mean erasing the past. It meant accepting that their life is not bound to yours. It meant loving them silently, without possession. It meant letting them fly, even if your hands ache from letting go. That night, I sat by the window. I watched the empty street. I felt the quiet ache of absence, a weight I could not lift. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, I will let her go. I will free her. And in freeing her, perhaps I free myself too. The house was quieter than I had ever imagined it could be. No footsteps on the wooden floor, no soft hum of the radio, no cup of tea left on the counter. For days, I wandered through it like a ghost. Each room carried memories of her presence, her laughter, her quiet talks, the small notes she left. The house felt too big, and yet, strangely, it also felt like a sanctuary. I found myself speaking to the empty chairs sometimes, telling her about my day, as if she were still there. I baked bread today, I said one morning. I added the extra butter you liked. The words sounded foolish, even to me, but they helped, even if only a little. Grief came softly, slowly. It was not dramatic. It did not crash like a wave. It sat beside me like an old companion. Sometimes it made me cry quietly in the kitchen. Sometimes it made me pause while washing dishes, staring at the window, as if I could see her outside. I realized that grief is not always about anger or sadness. Sometimes it is just a quiet ache, a hollow place that feels like love itself. I began writing letters to her, not to send, not to change anything, just to release the words trapped inside me. I hope you are well. I hope you are happy. I hope you know that you were loved here, always. I folded each letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box. It became my ritual, a way to say goodbye again and again while keeping her memory alive. Friends asked me how I was doing. I told them I was fine, and I was, in a way. I had learned that healing is not about forgetting. It is about making peace with what cannot be changed. I started walking in the garden more often. The flowers reminded me of the quiet mornings we had shared. The wind reminded me of her laughter. And sometimes I smiled, just thinking of her. without sadness, without pain. I realized that I had given her something more valuable than words or gifts. I had given her love without possession. I had given her a home without chains. And though it hurt, I knew that in letting her go, I had done what love truly is. Months passed. The empty rooms no longer felt heavy. I had rearranged furniture, planted new flowers, and found new rhythms in my days. I had learned to speak aloud to myself in the silence. I am okay, I would say, and she is okay too. Sometimes, when the wind rustled the leaves in the garden, I felt her presence, not physically, not as someone who had returned, but as a quiet memory, a gentle light that warmed my heart. I began to understand that closure is not a single moment. It is a slow unfolding, a gentle acceptance that life moves on, a quiet recognition that the love you give, even when not returned in the way you hoped, is never wasted. There were moments of loneliness, yes, moments when I wished I could see her smile across the table one last time. But those moments became softer. The ache in my chest dulled into something like gratitude. I was grateful for the years we had shared, grateful for the love we had quietly built, grateful that I had not held her too tightly, grateful that I had let her fly. I began leaving small notes for myself, reminders of life's little joys. Make your favorite tea. Read the book you love. Sit by the window and watch the sky. In doing so, I realized something important. Letting go does not mean emptiness. It means creating space for life to continue, for peace to settle, for love to exist quietly without ownership. I even began to smile again when I thought of her, not with longing, not with pain, but with the warmth of knowing that she was free and that her happiness was not tied to me. And slowly, the house, my home, began to feel alive again. Soft light through the curtains, warm smells from the kitchen, quiet laughter from the birds outside. Life had moved forward. I had moved forward. And love had remained, quietly, in the corners of my heart, untangled and free. I began to understand the truth that life had been teaching me all along. You cannot hold on to everyone you love. Sometimes love is not about presence. It is about giving someone the freedom to live fully, even if it hurts you. And in giving that freedom, you discover something quietly miraculous. You free yourself, too. Seasons changed, as they always do. Winter melted into spring, and the garden began to bloom again. The house, once heavy with absence, started to feel gentle, filled with light and quiet rhythms. I would sit by the window sometimes, a cup of tea in my hand, and watch the world move. The birds would sing, the wind would rustle the trees, and I would think of her, not with longing, not with sadness, but with a soft, quiet love that had settled into the corners of my heart. I realized that letting someone go does not erase them. It does not mean that they disappear from your life completely. They live in your memories, in the routines you shared, in the lessons they taught you about patience, kindness, and quiet devotion. And sometimes, letting go is the greatest act of love you can offer. I began to notice small signs that life had a way of returning joy, even after deep sorrow. A bird building a nest in the garden, a letter from a friend I had forgotten to write back to, the soft smell of baking bread in the morning. These little moments reminded me that life continues, even when people leave, that love does not vanish just because someone is gone. It transforms, gently, into something steady, quiet, and enduring. There were days when I still thought of her, wondered where she was and what she was doing. I sometimes imagined her smiling, happy, living the life she had chosen. And that thought no longer made me ache, it made me grateful, because she was free, and I had learned to be free too. I have come to understand something I never knew before. Love is not about possession. It is not about control or expectation. It is about giving without needing something in return. It is about trusting that the heart can survive loss and still grow. I learned that love is strongest when it is unselfish, when it asks nothing yet gives everything, when it releases and does not cling. Sometimes when I pass by her old room, I smile softly. I remember the laughter, the soft footsteps, the quiet conversations. I do not feel pain anymore. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the moments we shared. Gratitude for the love that taught me patience. Gratitude for the courage to let go. Life is full of quiet lessons. Some are loud and obvious, but the most important ones are often soft, whispered in moments of stillness. This was one of them. You cannot hold on to everyone you love. Sometimes you must release them, and in that release, you discover the most profound kind of freedom, both for them and for yourself. I still carry her in my heart. I do not need her to be present to feel her there. She is a gentle memory, a soft light, a quiet joy. And in that, I have found peace. She never looked back at me when she left, and I never asked her to, because love, true love, does not demand a return glance. It only asks that you let go gracefully and trust that happiness, for both of you, will find its way. So I freed her from my heart, and in freeing her, I freed myself. And the house, the garden, the world outside the window, all of it felt warm and alive once again. Life had moved forward. I had moved forward. And love, quiet and enduring, remained. And that, I think, is the most beautiful truth of all. Love is not about holding on. It is about letting go. And in that letting go, life continues, quietly, gently, and fully.